who wanted to see this, and we want to have a record of it. So yeah, we're ready to start with presentations. Colin or DJ, who would like to go first?
It's up to you, Colin.
If you're giving me the choice, I'll go first. I wouldn't mind. That would be great.
Okay.
Thank you, DJ. Okay, and as I said, I hope my voice pulls out. So just before I share my slides, I wanted to say a few words about what my motivation is for exploring self-empathy as part of the Defining Empathy project. You might be surprised to hear that I may be presenting self-empathy, but I'm not naturally gifted at it. In fact, I'd say that for most of my life, I was my tank was running pretty low on self-empathy, and it's only in recent years that I've made progress. And even then, I didn't know what the name was for the skills that I was developing, but now I can put names to them. Now I can see that some of those skills are indeed part of self-empathy. Also, you know, like many people, I was my own worst critic. I judged myself harshly for not being a good person or for not doing what I or others thought I should do. I was caught up in my own thoughts a lot. Couldn't step back and see that they were not actually who I was. You know, over-identifying with them and taking them to be the truth. And you know, I found it difficult to keep an open mind, or to develop other perspectives, or to see my own thoughts for what they really were. And I was also very disconnected with my body, from my breath, from the ground beneath my feet. I never developed the skills to really listen to my body and respond to what I was saying, but what it was saying to me. And I was overwhelmed with my emotions, with the result that I couldn't understand myself, and I was projecting my feelings onto others. So there was a lot going on. I'm not the only one, but there was a lot going on. That was then, and this is now. I'm still on this self-empathy journey, and you know, I've learned self-empathy skills as part of my as an emotional intelligence practitioner, as a coach, as an empathy circle facilitator, and you know, there's many other steps along the way, and no doubt there's many more ahead as well. And the Defining Empathy project has allowed me to become clear on how I can be more empathic with myself. And you know, I believe I can learn and grow from this and choose to be part of a culture of empathy. Being self-empathic is how I want to show up in the world. Self-empathy is the new superpower we should all strive for. There's my pitch. So let's start with the slides, and I hope it doesn't go on too long. I will kind of explain the slides rather than go through it as I would in a training. So I just want to listen to this interview, and then I'm not going to do this right, of course. Share screen, portion of screen, share. Let's see if I can put this into presenter view now. Presenter view. Okay. So are you seeing that? Are you seeing the defining self-empathy?
Yeah, see
page?
it.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So moving on. So I'd be interested to hear what everyone thinks self-empathy is. This is how it would go in the training. You know, we've all heard about empathy, but what about self-empathy? And I was looking for images that weren't too directive, so that people could really make up their own minds about what self-empathy might be. And so the idea would be to gather from the ideas from the group, and put, you know, they would drop it into the chat. Maybe we'd pick one or two and discuss them, or we could do something with Mentimeter, you know, the word cloud and Mentimeter. So that's how I'm suggesting we start off. Yeah, what does self-empathy mean to you? As simple as that, really.
Did you want us to shout it out, or did you want to actually do the exercise?
We could. What does everyone think? I wasn't planning on doing that, but I'm not seeing
I'm
hands
good with
raised.
doing a little bit of, going into it if everybody else is, but it's up to you. It's your presentation.
Okay, let's hear a couple of voices, just the people who want to say something. You don't have to.
Clarity. I'll give a word. Clarity.
Clarity. Yeah.
It's a personal way of being, of sensing into my own, sort of being open, the sense into my felt experience.
Awareness.
Awareness, sensing into felt experience. Okay.
Embodiment and embodying, understanding how my body is telling me to be.
Listen to our body's embodiment, right? Gotcha.
Self-acceptance. Go ahead.
Self-acceptance, self-forgiveness.
So it is self-empathy. So you come up with a couple of self words there: self-acceptance and self-forgiveness.
This is DJ. I think self-empathy is the foundation of empathy.
Okay. The foundation of empathy. Yes. Yes. I think we've got a good cross-section of views there, actually. That's clarity, sensing into the felt experience, awareness, embodiment, self-acceptance, self-forgiveness, foundation of empathy. That's a good cross-section. I think there's a bit of overlap, but that's it's quite a wide spectrum of views. Thank you for that. So then we move on to what the experts say. And there isn't a lot of research out there on self-empathy. But some of these papers I haven't access to myself, but I've found these quotes on other papers. So this is a selection of 3, and these are all published papers, or taken from published papers, peer-reviewed papers. So, I mean, I can read it out. I don't know if I need to read it out, or should I read it out? Do you think? I'll read it out. Self-empathy means that an aspect of yourself observes in an empathic manner an aspect of yourself that experiences. This is done with an attitude of suspended judgment and openness towards yourself. That's what Jordan says. Barrett Leonard says, the capacity to empathize with one's own experience is essential for the development of empathy for others. So it kind of ties in with the foundation of empathy that DJ was saying. And Sherman says, self-empathy simply requires you to notice and recognize what is happening in you. So there's the awareness and clarity that a couple of people mentioned before. Yes, and so I think Violetta mentioned again that sources were important, that we should include sources. I'm not sure, maybe you can explain to me what kind of detail would need to be in the sources that we would show on the slides, or would it be kind of
This is
given
perfect.
afterward? That would be okay. All right. Okay. So that's a selection of what the experts are saying on self-empathy, and there isn't much to find. I thought that it was important to give another perspective, and that's from the compassionate communication or nonviolent communication community, and the founder being Marshall Rosenberg, which I'm sure everyone is familiar with. I've included a quote here from a guy called Tom Bond, who I'm doing a course with over 1 year. on this, and he trained with Marshall Rosenberg, and he's the founder and director of the New York Center for Nonviolent Communication. And he defines self-empathy as the ability to see my own experience through the lens of feelings and needs. And those of you who are familiar with NVC, it's all about needs awareness, and using feelings and judgments to understand what our needs are. So things like welcoming our judgments and feeling our feelings fully connecting to our needs. So really being open to all of these aspects of ourselves. And he also says that self-empathy can create compassion, connection, and understanding. So it can lead to these things, although it is separate. And one thing that he said many times is asking a simple question to ourselves, like, what is that? When something comes up for us, whether it's a feeling or a judgment, or there's something, our actual physical feeling in our body, just having this curiosity and asking ourselves a question like that, being able to remember in the first instance to ask ourselves that question, and then to explore that can be an important part of being self-empathic. And all of this ties in with emotional intelligence, well, especially the feelings part and the emotions. My training is in emotional intelligence, and emotions are data, and there's wisdom in those emotions. And in the case of NVC, the wisdom is they tell us what our needs are. So yes, so I just wanted to mention that. There has been some research recently on self-empathy. Stephanie Neubrandt, a researcher, I think she's German, based in Switzerland, I'm not quite sure. Edwin can tell us because he interviewed her not so long ago, and she published a paper, actually, I think it's maybe 3 papers all as part of her PhD on empathy. So she has come up with this new construct, I suppose, and it's like empathy with an I, the I being, the first person, or shorthand for introspective. And she's come up with this kind of 4 part process. So you have, first of all, this internal attention, which means that you perceive, that's the ability to perceive your own bodily and psychological phenomena. The metaposition is kind of where you can kind of come out of yourself and look down from a height, so that you can see yourself, with the distance, I suppose, a certain distance. This accepting attitude, I think that's really important, to be open, not to judge, to be curious. And then the understanding is just to make sense of our experience, whatever that is, in that particular context. And she's then saying that this process, which is part of being empathic, then she's looking at it from the therapeutic point of view, and she can see that I don't know how complete her study is, but she is saying that basically it can engender compassion and also have positive outcomes in terms of mental health. So that's what she's saying there. And there's one other piece of, well, I've classed it as research. Maybe Edwin will correct me on this. These are 2, both of these authors are PhDs also. This isn't a published paper as such, so a peer-reviewed paper. It's published online. It's easy to access, but it's specifically on self-empathy. So that was the attraction of putting that in here. And they're saying, in essence, it's a deeply personal exploration of that which happens inside yourself, the self, observing itself, experiencing itself, feeling itself. Through self-empathy, the self develops self-awareness. And they also have this, I mean, maybe there's even more than these 4 steps, but these seem to be the 4 key steps that they have as part of being self-empathic. So they've got this arrival phase, which is kind of like doing a body scan and carving out this reflective space inside yourself. And then they have this sensing exercise where you can, I guess, it's not the same as focusing, but it's going in that direction, where you can sense into your body and give it a shape, and maybe even make a shape with your, in terms of movement of what it is you're feeling inside your body, and I'm putting a name on it as well, a meaningful name. Then there's suspending judgment, which this is coming up again and again. Suspending judgment is important, to recognize and name the judgment, and to allow it to pass through you. And then lastly, to set intentions and to invoke the intentions also. So setting the intention would be to determine what your needs are, I suppose. Yeah, determine what your needs are. And then the invoking intention is then taking action. So if you were feeling sad, you could put a hand on your heart, or if you were feeling tired, you could close your eyes, or if you were feeling criticized, you could give yourselves words of encouragement, that kind of thing. So I had, there's one paper that's kind of the foundation of everything that we're doing in the Defining Empathy project, and that is Carl Rogers' paper on empathic and unappreciated way of being. So I've taken just 4 quotes from, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 quotes from that paper, and I have to say that these are all related to empathy and not self-empathy, because he didn't refer explicitly to self-empathy. But I thought that it might be an interesting exercise to see if they can be translated and applied to self-empathy. So the exercise would be like to read through the quotes and see if you could substitute you or other for I, me, my, or myself, and if that would make sense. If you were able to translate Rogers' words to apply to self-empathy. Maybe that doesn't work so well, and if it doesn't work so well, maybe there's something in that you can learn from.
It works for me, like
Yes.
the being sensitive moment to moment to the changing felt meanings in the other person. It's just instead of other person in myself. So just noticing because the feelings are always changing in myself, and just being sensitive to those changes. So it seems like it's totally over, translates.
Right.
Temporarily living in my life, moving about it in a delicacy without making judgments. Oh, I feel good when I read it.
Okay, and maybe that's a good idea that people do call it out, and maybe they will feel something in them when they say it. So yes, there may be 1 or 2 that aren't as easy to translate as that, but even then they could prompt the participants to think about self-empathy in a certain way. Yes, and when I'd be introducing this, I'd mention who Carl Rogers is, and very briefly, and mention his connection with Gendlin, because he talks about experiencing in that paper quite a bit. And the next slide moves on to Gendlin. So that would be that's what I would do if I was when I'm presenting it. Is there anything else I wanted to say? And also just to qualify, that paper is mostly talking about in a therapeutic setting, just to make that clear. and that it's also other-oriented empathy rather than self-empathy. But it can be applied to self-empathy, I believe. And Rogers also discusses the application of empathy to other professions such as teaching and social work. So those applications for broader everyday life, and not just in a therapy setting. So this is going to be the first practice. That this is a focusing practice by Gendlin, and Gendlin was a contemporary of Carl Rogers and also was at the University of Chicago. And they both knew each other, as I understand. And here's his definition of focusing, or experiential focusing. It's a form of felt sensing, a practice of allowing our bodies to guide us to deeper self-knowledge and healing. Excuse me. So yes, Gendlin didn't talk specifically about self-empathy either. So this is back in, I guess, the 60s. I don't think it was talked about much back then. And but this idea of listening to our bodies, connecting with our bodies, is mentioned by other researchers being a key part of self-empathy, and Rogers refers also to the felt sense. So this is a 6-step process, and there are instructions to go with this. And I have the instructions here, but I don't know if it would be helpful to go through them, or what does everyone think? Do they want to hear how it would be instructed?
I'm interested in it. Yeah. I've got the book right here, Focusing. It's like that's a little book. It's by Gendlin, and I went through and read it, and just every time he said focusing, I translated the word into self-empathy. I think this is like that core focusing. Instead of using the word focusing, use self-empathy, and it just like totally fits, So I think it's the central practice, the self-empathy practice.
Then that's why I put it in, because I knew that you're a fan of this. I was a little bit skeptical, but let's see how what everyone thinks about this. And I haven't actually done it myself either. But I think one of the things about a practice like this is that you're not necessarily going to get it the first time, and just to be kind and patient with yourself, that you might not actually have this shift that Gendlin talks about. So yes, and the other thing about this is Gendlin is very careful to point out that the instructions are just guidelines, and you should adapt things to the way that fits best for you. And he actually has instructions for not following the instructions. So yeah, and it goes on and on. It's a kind of a circular thing. So yes, so well, so clearing a space. Okay, clearing a space, as it's that's an internal space he's talking about, and one way of doing that is to drop into your body first of all. So just to really relax and I guess focus on your breath for a moment and ground yourself and drop into your body, and then ask yourself the question, or one question would be, how is my life going? Something as broad as that. Or what is the main thing for me right now? I think he uses deliberately vague language. And then you sense into your body and let any answers that arise from that slowly come. Then comes the second stage, and that is where you select some kind of problem or challenge that you have at the moment, and you feel into your body again, you sense into your body again, and you're looking for some kind of sensation, I guess, but it's kind of a vague thing. Where it might be in the pit of your stomach, or it could be in your chest, or wherever it might be. It'll be different for each person. But it's kind of it's unclear and vague, and that's what he's kind of suggesting it should be. And then we come on to the next part, which is the handle. That's kind of putting a name to it, or putting an image to it. So it's you're describing the quality of that sense that you have in your body, whether it's kind of a stuck feeling, or maybe it's hot or cold, or maybe it feels sharp, or whatever it might be. But just kind of putting a word or a phrase or an image to it. And then in the resonating phase, you're going over and back between this handle that you this name that you've, or image that you've come up with, and the felt sense. You're testing them out against each other, and it may be that things change, that the felt sense in you changes, and if it changes, then you can change the word or the image that you have, and you stick with that until it feels just right for you. Then moving on to the fifth stage, you ask yourself, what makes the whole problem so blank? So whatever that quality is, what makes the whole problem so stuck? What makes the whole problem so fuzzy? And then you be with the felt sense again, and see if you feel some kind of a shift inside of you. So you're going through this whole experience, you're feeling into your body, you're the flow of experiences, and you're testing all the time between the name of the image that you've given to it and how you're actually feeling. And it may be that something, that you actually feel a shift of some sort. You feel something physically move inside of you. It could be quite subtle. And then in the last stage, you stay with whatever that shift is, if it comes along for you, in a kind of a friendly way. And because you've completed this flow of experiencing, it kind of resolves whatever problem it was that had arisen for you, that you were feeling in your body. That's my understanding. Maybe someone else can correct me on that, because I haven't actually done this myself. I'm not sure if you'd need to be trained to do this. There's a video, there's someone by the name of Kathy McGuire. She's got a couple of videos. You can actually do training through the Focusing Institute or whatever. If we were to do this in the training, well, you need to be trying it out beforehand, just to become more confident as a guide. I'd be interested to hear afterward what everyone thinks about this, if they think it would work. But if this is a bit too much, then we could do something like a body scan type of thing, which is kind of a lot easier. It doesn't achieve what this achieves. It's more like just connecting with your body, and maybe learning to sense into your body, but you're not going to get the felt meaning. That's the thing. Just through a normal body scan, I don't think.
Could I add a
Okay,
comment?
keep on
there?
going.
Could I add a
Yeah.
comment? I just put a link in there to interview with Ann Weiser Cornell. So I know both Kathy McGuire and Ann Weiser Cornell. I'd done a bunch of actually some focusing examples with Kathy McGuire, that video you're talking about, and then also with Ann Weiser Cornell. a workshop. Plus, she did a session with me. She did an hour session, so there's a recording of the sample. And they're both, big leaders. They had worked with Gene Gendlin, and kind of it sounds kind of complicated, all these steps, but it's sensing into, doing that body scan, and then finding a feeling. What is the feeling I have? Like right now, I feel a little constriction and tense in my head. I feel kind of so it's just sort of finding a feeling and describing the felt experience. Like, oh, it feels tense, it feels kind of constricted, it feels like a knot, kind of like a stone sort of in my brain. And so you share that. There's two versions of it. One, you just do it on your own. The other version is I just share it. I have a listener. For example, we could do an exercise where there's one person focuses and the other person does self-empathy. I think self-empathy is a good word. And then I just share the feeling. You don't share an idea or thought. You try to name the felt experience as a felt experience, and maybe even use metaphors and so forth. And then you have someone that listens and reflects back what you're saying. And that actually helps you go deeper into the feeling. And you notice moment to moment that feeling, that constriction that I have in my head, it's going to start changing. It might start, because I'm sharing it, it kind of opens up. It kind of has it's taking up more space in my consciousness. And then you just notice different feelings just come into the space. So yeah, so that's sort of like the essence of it. And yeah, I think some little exercises could be done, and it starts with those body scans, like you're saying, like just sense into your body, feel what's there, top to bottom, and then share some feelings and kind of where they are in your body, and then maybe get a reflection. So anyway, just some thoughts about it. It's pretty cool. Every time I do focusing, well, I used to do focusing, I'd come out like, this feels so good. So it's for me at least, it was a really good, I just got a lot out of it. I haven't done it for a long time, but it feels really good.
I just did it as Colin talked along, and it was like transformational in like 3 minutes. So I think you did an excellent job. And yeah, I got everything, Edwin. I experienced that just now when you did it for us right now. I did that.
Okay, good to hear. Yeah, it might not be that way for everyone, but that's great if it's working for you. You're obviously connected with your body, yes. But Edwin, would this be done in pairs, or how would it?
Yeah, I
work
think
best?
pairs, maybe going into pairs would be a way to do it. But we'd need a little bit of they have all kinds of exercises, the focusing community, like you go focusinginstitute.com or whatever it is. You just there's all kinds of exercises for it, and could just create some kind of build on what they already have.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really powerful. I think it's the essence. It was like it was I'm kind of ad-libbing here, don't want to take up your time, but the Gendlin was a contemporary with Carl Rogers, and he was looking at people in therapy. Some people progress and some people don't. Who is the people that progress in therapy? And he found that it was the people who didn't like kind of intellectualize and get caught up in all their intellectual schemes, just sharing that kind of go in circles. Whereas the people who just expressed the felt experience that they're having and sort of at the edge of their consciousness that had the most growth. And I think that's sort of like the essence of self-empathy, or the power of self-empathy. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Edwin. So there's a bit of text on this, and I don't know if maybe I can present it in a different way to make it a bit more exciting, because it is a key part of the whole presentation. I had previously come up with different opportunities depending on whether it was active listener, passive listener, or active speaker. That was way back at the beginning, but I was conflating self-compassion with self-empathy, and then I learned. And so this is kind of my take based on all of what you've seen before, I suppose, just kind of summarized in a way. So I guess in any of the roles, that would be interesting. In any of the roles, could you apply these principles? I think you could. You know, you can choose you can sense into your body to understand the felt meaning of your flow of experiences. You can notice your feelings and judgments that arise and let them pass through. You can remain curious about your thoughts and feelings and judgments and sensations. You can focus on your breathing and ground yourself in the present moment. You can develop awareness of your needs and take action to meet those needs, and you can apply self-empathy in challenging situations to remain empathic towards others. So self-empathy begets empathy. And these are things that you can do before, during, and after the empathy circle, I believe. You know, and for example, you can focus on your breathing and ground yourself if you're feeling that your focus is going and you're not being present, to really come back to yourself and to open that space inside of you so that you can sense any felt meaning, for example, or just be really there for that other person. So I'll collect any ideas at the end from if you believe this could be presented differently or if there's anything else you'd like to add. So there are the opportunities to practice it, and these are the benefits as I see them kind of split into the three roles. Kind of there's some overlap. So for example, I should put in active speaker. When we practice self-empathy, the quality of the sharing goes up. The depth of the felt experience increases. We have more understanding of ourselves. We feel more fully heard and our needs are met. And again, this is self-empathy. When we practice self-empathy, not the empathy, the self-empathy. And then for active listener, greater self-awareness, more openness and presence and focus, also more understanding, better able to manage feelings, and the quality of the of the reflection also increases. And then on the other hand, you have things like projection and judgments, they actually decrease. And then for the silent listener, there's some overlap with what the active listener also benefits from. Obviously, they're not reflecting, so that doesn't come into it, but pretty much everything else is the same. And maybe this list can be expanded. That's what I came up with so far. And I thought that maybe, I don't know how I didn't time all of this, but there could be an empathy circle where people actually report on their findings on where they were conscious of being self-empathic in the empathy circle and what benefits they became of it. It sounds like it would be a good idea to include in the training, but in terms of the timings, I don't know how that would work. Because it would be good to get feedback from participants as well on what they saw the benefits were when they were open and curious and non-judgmental and all of that. So we're nearly there. This is a practice that Priyanka had in her presentation, and I've kept it pretty much the same. I've added a couple of questions at the end because when we judge ourselves, it can really get in the way of being self-empathic. It's important to develop awareness of that. And this journaling exercise, I think, went down well the last time, so I kept it and just modified it slightly. Lou made a point about looking for any needs that are behind the judgments. So that's why I added in that question at the end. I can provide the participants with a needs list, so they can choose from that. If they have any judgments, they can see, oh well, I'm judging myself, but there's some need, there's some reason for why I'm doing that. What's the need that's unmet? That's the idea there. But being self-empathic, the idea is that you just let the judgments flow through you. However, it would be good to have that information if there's something that you need. And also to get away from judging yourself or having judgments, because we all have judgments. We don't have to obviously share them with others, but we can strive to reduce them. But yeah, this trap of judging yourself or having judgments can be self-defeating. And then we come to the last slide, which is time to reflect. So what has become clearer for you? How would you define self-empathy now? So maybe just take a stock take between the start and finish. And how are you going to apply this in the next empathy circle? Boom, done. Stop share. Thank you.
I love the last image.
So that's here right next to me. I can see it from here, although it's dark, so I can't see anything at the moment. Thank you. So any comments or questions that would be welcome?
I thought it was great.
Great.
Oh, sorry. After you,
It was
DJ.
really great. Yeah. That's all I was gonna say. Sorry, Wendy. That was a really great presentation, Colin. That was really, really good. I can tell you've done a lot of work on this. And I think it's phenomenal what you did. And I think it's really close to like being ready for, the big time, like, graduating into making it part of the Empathy Center or however, it is that it evolves for you. Really, it's just remarkable. And I just want to commend you. Job well done.
Receiving loud and clear. Thank you, DJ. You're very generous with your praise. Thank you.
I want
I have
to,
put a lot of effort into it.
yeah, I really want to back up exactly what DJ said. I thought the quality of the slides was wonderful. The images you chose, that one with the glasses and looking through the glasses, you must have hunted high and low for some really good images, I think, because it was just perfect for me anyway. I love the research that you've done and synthesized it, and it just looked really professional and a good balance of activities, that engaging people on the course as well as information, just a great balance. Really well done for your hard work.
Thank you, Wendy. You don't all have to praise me, by the way. There can be one mean one. That's okay.
Well, I want to just second what everyone was saying. There is the experiential, I think bringing in that experiential, so there's some, body scans, some reflection of feelings that, looking into focusing some of the intro exercises, the simple intro exercises, I think that would give it that experiential quality, how to work that in, but it's a great like foundation framework for adding that experiential. Of course, that takes a lot more time. We only had like an hour. And the other thing is it could be an empathy circle at the end where people only share felt experiences, no ideas, but you only share what it is you're feeling and you get a reflection. That's sort of the essence that I see of focusing, is just sharing the feeling, and that's sort of it. Sorry. So anyway, that's just some thoughts.
Thank you. Yes, more. Yes, experiential, and having an empathy circle where the we share felt meanings. Okay.
Maybe
Gotcha.
take an intro workshop with focusing. You know, it would give you the tools just for copying that over whatever they do. Just how did they do it? And they have tons of, you know, intro kind of workshops and exercises.
Mm.
So speaking of sharing experiences, I would like to share my experience of your presentation with you. So if you're good with that, I immediately was like, oh, it's so pretty. The very first slide I was like, oh. And then I started to, as you were going through, you were talking about how the meta experience. I was like, oh, that's like reflection. Like when you step back and look at what's going on, like why we do the empathy reflection. Oh, cool. And then you had the slide that had arrive, sent, suspend, all of that. And I was like, oh, I want to do those. Immediately I was like, yeah, that looks incredible. That sounds like an excellent practice to have everybody do when you come into a group. Let's all arrive together. Okay. Are we here? Feel how you're feeling. Okay, good, cool. We're just going to suspend that. It's perfect. It's valid. Let's move right on. So I was like, I want to do that every time. Somewhere in there, I had this, see, this is why everything works for me moment where I was like, this is all so good. And then when you had the slide with the 5 different things and we did that reflection, I was like, wow, I mean, that is the power of reflection. Like it takes a second to flip the words around and experience the reverse of something. But right there it is. There, right there. There you go. And then it made me think, so as you were going into the next few slides, it was like, oh, so what if what you needed, you gave to yourself? What would that do when you like get into the world out there? Oh yeah, that's a good point. And then the listen to the judgment thing, I was like, oh, I had this whole, it seems like really done now that I'm saying it out loud, but I had this whole moment, I was like, that's like the difference of self-empathy and regular empathy. So self-empathy is when you ask and reflect. And group empathy, like in the circle, is when you listen and reflect. Huh, well done. And then when you did that practice, I had a whole experience with that, which thank you for that. I grew as a person and I actually have an actionable thing I have to do today to take better care of myself. So thanks. That was my experience. Presentation.
I'm getting a lot of enthusiasm as always, Cara. Thank you. A lot of energy. Thank you.
Well, we
It
have
seems like
2
it was very
minutes before we start with
experiential.
DJ, just a heads up.
Right. Okay.
I loved how you turned Roger's words into self-empathy. I love that piece. The idea to keep maybe all presentations focused on the article. I forgot to do that with mine, but I think that's a great idea.
I have to put up my hand. I only remembered it because it was drilled into me by Edwin. We were meeting on Mondays with Cara, and I was well prepared to include it. So yes. Okay. Is that it? Does anyone else want to say anything? If not, I can hand it over to DJ.
Okay, well, final jazz hands. Thanks, Colin. Beautifully done. I really enjoyed it and got a lot out of it. Looking forward to its development. It's to be continued, I think. So, DJ, do you want to take it over?
Yeah, so I'm thinking, how can I possibly segue into what I want to present after that really phenomenal presentation that seems so well formulated and well constructed and well defined in terms of this defining empathy circle or group. And mine's not anything like that at all. It's completely unformulated and undeveloped. Though I do have some ideas about where to take it to become developed and formulated. And so I do have the presentation that I made before, and I just modified it slightly. I took out a bunch of stuff and tried to simplify it, and then I have that chart. And there weren't that many people at my previous presentation, and it was right at the end. And I think some people even left before there was any discussion. So I don't want to do a repeat of my previous presentation, and it was not recorded. So there may be some holes, for some people. So feel totally okay with interrupting me and asking me questions, because the way that my trajectory is going to go may not be clear to you. Okay, and that's totally okay, because I'm not going to pretend that it should be or could be clear to you, because my previous presentation was so truncated because of time. And where I was going with it, and let me just remind you, we did have the session where there was brainstorming. Everybody's just brainstorming, like, what is relational empathy, or what is empathy, or whatever. And we came up with these 25 terms. And then we clustered those according to 3 key terms. And those 3 key terms were awareness, connection, and language. And then all the terms were clustered underneath those 3 key terms that we constructed. And typically at this point, I would put it into a paradigm that is kind of like a Rubik's Cube kind of paradigm with a 3-dimensional. And this is something that I was trained to do at UCLA in anthropology. It's based on a whole history of analysis of symbolic and cognitive anthropology. And so taking the meaning of culture, which is a lived experience, right, that we all have, but it's also a fluid experience, but it's a multi-layered experience as well. So it has symbolism, the sacred, the ideal. These are things that happen in culture that we don't necessarily think about. I mean, if we get a tattoo, for instance, we might think, oh, I'm just getting this butterfly tattoo because I love butterflies or whatever. But symbolically, that might represent freedom, or that might represent, a garden or whatever. But we don't necessarily have to articulate these things to have them motivate us and have impact on us and our lives. And so I really love what Colin did, because I think it really focuses on the self in a very profound and particular way. And I think that segues perfectly into the relational empathy that I've been working on with all of you, and how it's not necessarily who or what you're having the relationship with as a self, but it's that intersubjectivity between the self and whatever it is you're having the relationship with. So you can have a relationship with democracy. You can have a relationship with the environment. You can have a relationship with your dog. You can have a relationship with all of anything that's outside of you, the self. And when we're looking at the empathy circle, obviously we're looking at maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 other human beings, right? But we're bringing all of this relational empathy way of being to that empathy circle. And what I don't want to get lost in, and what I don't get lost in my own work or in my own life, is this idea that we judge others constantly, that we're constantly stereotyping, we're constantly compartmentalizing other people and ourselves, we're constantly making superlatives, placing values on less than, more than. I don't do any of that in my work. I never have. And so none of that kind of therapeutic strategy, that none of that really applies to my work, because meaning is deeper than any of that stuff, and none of that stuff is useful. And I also believe, just personally, outside of my academic self, that we manifest whatever we focus on. So I'm not gonna focus on the negative, how cruel people can be. Like my house was just vandalized. I've lost $20,000-$30,000 worth of stuff. And this is the third time this has happened to me. And it's the second time that it's teenagers. And, the police say to me, well, they're minors, they're kids, you can't do anything. And, it's so frustrating. And I could totally go down the rabbit hole of feeling victimized, of feeling anger that they're not going to have any like learning experience or any consequence. And then what about me, the why me kind of thing. And so in my new me, I'm kind of comparing it to the first time this happened to me about 15 years ago, where I was just so devastated that it happened. They poured paint in my car engine. I lost my car, and my car insurance wouldn't pay for it, and my homeowner's insurance wouldn't pay for it. I was just out. And so this time I said, you're going to use your good practices of empathy and relational empathy and manifesting. And I'm thinking, maybe this is the universe's way of telling me that I need to help teenagers, because that's really what I started out with my work, helping teenagers. And so that brings me back to relational empathy. So when I was doing my dissertation with teenagers who had committed crimes, they committed homicides, they had been institutionalized, and they were in my classroom, and they hated me, and they hated learning, and they hated life. And I had to come up with a way, some kind of magic way to help them. And so I actually used something like an empathy circle. I didn't call it an empathy circle, but it was about listening and sitting in a circle and communicating and talking about respect and how we can build respect around language. So we would use words like empowerment, liberation, these kinds of things. And we actually did transform into people who were literate and respectful and graduating high school and going on with life. And so it's very deeply layered. It's really complicated. So I'm basically approaching relational empathy with you today with that background, with this kind of coming to you as a human being with all its brokenness, with all its frailty, with all its I'm in the moment of my life, and this very long history of knowing that language and connection and awareness are what life is about. So, any questions so far? All right. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yep, I see it.
Okay, good. Okay, so defining relational empathy. We have our inside world, the outside world, and the intersubjectivity between the two. And it's like electricity. We are electricity. So there's an energy to it. And so today I'm just going to do an overview, basically of the whole presentation. I'm briefly going to review the brainstorming and clustering, briefly review the concept mapping. And my goal by the end of this presentation or by the end of this talk, that we come to something that could be a relational empathy inventory for the future. And this would be a series of questions that we could co-construct that might be useful for people who are new to the idea of empathy or empathy circles or relational empathy. So relational empathy is somewhat undefined. It can be viewed as encompassing all of empathy. So it really becomes what is empathy or what is the culture of empathy. But it also can just include all the relational aspects of human dynamics. So it is fluid, it is ephemeral, it is the intersubjectivity that one or the self or oneself experiences with all relations, including and especially with the self. So I don't know if any of you have seen the inner peace inventory that I made, but I'm kind of thinking that a relational empathy inventory would be kind of similar to that, where they're very open-ended questions, but they would have questions about the self, they would have questions about relationships, questions about society, community, and the bigger world. So I'm just trying to simplify these concepts that I kind of went into detail previously about. So I'm basing this on the conceptual art movement that was really popular in the 60s, where artists would write directions down of how to do art. And that would be their art. And now 40 years later, 50 years later, they're dead, but people can still do their art and they can still have these exhibits of their art. So that's what we're doing here, is we're just kind of processing, making the concepts of relational empathy. And it has to do with the self as a fluid experience with all different kinds of relationships. And so it does have to do with semantics and semantic networks and how our brain functions with those semantic networks. So it's multi-layered, multi-dimensional, multi-consciousnesses, and multiplicities. And so basically where I'm coming from here is that inside the self, there's all this meaning making going on during an empathy circle. Now, some of that meaning making kind of gets lost in the complexity of it all. Some of it gets focused on, like if you're doing the focusing or you're doing the body scan and you're zeroing in on it. But when you try to attach a word to it, a language to it, that's when a lot of choices are made and a lot of meaning making is made, because you're putting the language out there for the other people to hear. And their interpretation of the language may or may not be exactly what you intend. So this idea of intentionality is really important. And so I think in the empathy circle, if you have intentionality and you're focusing on intentionality as the purpose of empathy, and that you want empathy to happen, then that's going to help the process, regardless of your semantics, regardless of what language you're using or what layer of meaning you're kind of attaching to your language. So you can only be sure that it's never finished, it's never complete, it's never permanent, it's never done. So when you're speaking in an empathy circle, you know, there's that struggle of, you know, how do I make meaning right now? How do I relate to this circle? How do I relate to myself? And that's never going to be complete That's never going to be a permanent reflection of what's really going on inside of you. So I think with empathy, for me, what makes empathy and what makes empathy in the relational aspect is that it feels good, whatever is going on, that it becomes inspirational or it becomes uplifting. And maybe that's a simplification of it. And maybe it's something that could be argued, and maybe it's something that many scholars have written about, and, you know, maybe I'm not making any sense. So I'm actually going to stop right there and stop sharing because it's like another sort of chapter there. So what do you guys think so far?
I love it. I just love your honesty and the contextualization that you gave at the beginning. I mean, when Colin started, he explained his motivation and you explained yours, and that whole connection with intentionality. I really respect the way you're doing and the vision that you're projecting for this relational empathy part. I just love it, DJ.
Oh, thanks, Wendy. It's okay not to love it. It's okay to question, like Colin was saying, it's okay. What about you, Edwin?
I found myself upset with those kids, like going to wring their necks. It's like, it's with the, that they, for me, that's the culture of empathy, or the lack of empathy in the culture. People doing stuff like that. There's a culture we live in that's sort of, for me, the relational empathy, the quality of relationships between people. And when somebody does something like that with a lack of care for people that they're impacting like that, I mean, for me, that's just like that's the relational, like a block, or inhibition, or it's blocking that relational empathy. So it kind of describes the relationship very much in the culture in general, with all the stuff that's happening, that kind of basically crime is a sense of lack of empathy, and a lack of, and there's all kinds of motivations for that, which doesn't justify it, but there's a whole string of lack of empathy. So I guess that's what was kind of coming up for me in your story, which I appreciated. Really connected with your personal story and setting that up, and kind of just feeling quite irritated that people would do such a thing, and just knowing the sense, just that sense of violation when people do stuff like that. You just feel, I mean, I know that my world, when something like that happens, like the whole world feels kind of more dangerous and sort of mistrusting when I've had that kind of stuff happen to me. So and that sort of taps into that feeling of the culture of empathy, or the relational empathy, that there's a lack of relational empathy in that situation. In terms of the presentation, I just really love the color of the graphics and the flow. So I kind of like that sort of visual capturing of the ongoing flow, and yeah, really enjoyed those colors and so forth. So anyway, tying in your experience with relational empathy and how that experience demonstrates is kind of the core, the lack of empathy in the culture. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's interesting, Edwin. You're always so interesting. Yeah, so I don't feel that this second time around. Maybe because the main girl that the police had attempted to, they removed her from the property. And I had said press charges, but they said they couldn't. She was a runaway. And I was a runaway. And I think that maybe that had a really big impact on me. Because I think that symbolically maybe we don't have a choice, I'm not sure, but we do kind of put this sort of cursory layer over others, and we're constantly looking for those connections that we can relate to in our own lives, which I find problematic most of the time. But in this case, it actually works to her advantage, right? Because I feel her angst. I feel her rejection, maybe by her parents or her family or her home life. Her home life is so bad that maybe she turns to drugs, or maybe she turns to prostitution or whatever. And I didn't do those things. You know, I got a car and a job and an apartment, you know. But I could have, you know, I could have easily become something else. I could have easily become a drug addict. I just have this inner self that is so incredibly powerful that could never happen to me. And so the question for me really becomes, how come I have that really strong inner self? And how can we empower our teenagers and our children to have that kind of belief and strength in the inner self? Because you know what? Parents are really bad at parenting. They're typically, not all. I'm sure, Carrie, you're a perfect parent, and I'm sure, Violetta, you're a perfect parent, and Wendy, I'm sure you are too. But generally speaking, you know, people aren't trained how to be parents, and they do make a lot of mistakes. And schools are places of profound injustice. And so, you know, these children and teenagers have no place to go. And so this is kind of where I'm coming from, is that, you know, relational empathy in us as people who are defining empathy, it takes on a new dimension for us because we're defining it. And we want to push those boundaries out into the real world. It's not just something that exists inside the empathy circle for the purposes of what, you know. So we want to have that culture of empathy. That's why I sort of, you know, put it out there, like, what is the culture of empathy? Well, the culture of empathy has to begin with our inner self, right? It has to. But how do we get beyond, you know, those violations? How do we do that? And when is it healthy and when is it not healthy for us? You know, if you stay in a domestic violent situation, right, which I did do, you know, you're constantly making excuses of why that person is being abusive and violent. You know, so, and that's unhealthy. But for me today to forgive those vandals, those teenagers, that's healthy for me to forgive them. And so it kind of depends on the situation. So let me, if it's okay, let me just jump.
I can add something very briefly as well, DJ. My opinion, this I hear you asking a lot of questions of yourself and trying to make meaning of this this incident that has happened to you, and tying that in with what you were saying before about the importance of meaning making and intentionality, and even if we don't agree on the words, it's the intention that matters. But you know, you're sharing this really powerful experience with us, and showing that how you're applying empathy to that, which I think that can be quite inspiring, and so I can see how from what you're describing, that this meaning making is going on out in your life outside of the empathy circle, but also comes into the empathy circle. I'm interested to know more about these questions that you're suggesting that we co-construct, you know, as part of this relational empathy inventory, what that might look like. Yeah, and the yeah, I really like the presentation, and the it's very creative. Yeah, it's very creative, so it's engaging.
Well, you're sweet. You're so sweet. Okay. So yeah, I can show you exactly what I mean. I can show you the inner peace inventory, and I can show you a couple of those questions and see if maybe they could be adopted to relational empathy. Or I was thinking at one point that at this juncture, or in a few minutes after we look at the schematic, a little bit more carefully, that I would just ask you to construct one statement, kind of what you did at the beginning of yours a little bit, Colin, one statement about relational empathy, like, you know, what it means to you or how you would define it. So keep that in mind, Colin, and I'll ask you in a few minutes what you're thinking about. And, you know, you can kind of lead me, you know, which direction, or everyone can participate in that co-construction of the next step, because I really do want to get to that point where everybody's participating in the co-construction of the next step, because that's what I'm willing to do. I could create this whole kind of like workbook, or this whole kind of experiential journal or whatever, about relational empathy, because I do believe that it's unique according to not only the individual, but the group. So like at the Empathy Center, for instance, if there was a group of people, maybe 5 people, maybe 20 people, I don't know, but they were going to work together, you know, through a period of time. So the group would be constant. Then you could actually construct the meaning of relational empathy for that group. And you could keep going back there and sort of redefining, and you could actually come up with these fill-in PDFs where people could be filling it in their off time, like when they're not in the group, where they're not actually working with others, that, you know, they're just chilling. They could be filling that out and then, you know, contributing to this sort of like almost narrative of the experience. And I do think that there's power in that. And I think that's kind of where we are in society today, where everybody's participating in their own meaning making, and everybody's becoming like an influencer of whatever it is that they're doing in their life. All of a sudden, you know, I'm an expert in this because I do this. You know, I've been doing this now for 6 months. No, I'm kidding. But you know, I mean, everybody is just sort of, you know, empowering themselves to kind of tell the world, this is who I am. And so that's kind of what I'm thinking of here a little bit anyway. And that goes for you guys as well. So this is the model. And then this model isn't really so tangential to the empathy circles or the empathy center, as it is to the research behind all of this stuff. So this is where I would be looking at other scholars. I would be looking at other kinds of ethnographies, other kinds of perspectives on all of this meaning making. So you have language here, and you have the cosmic or ideal. There's 2 L's there, it shouldn't be. So you have language in the ideal, in the sacred component. So you also have language and social or cultural, like what people actually say. And then you have the actual physicality of language, like going back to what Colin was talking about, how you have this visceral feeling, you have feelings in your body. And if you bring those to the surface, you can deepen your self-knowledge. Well, that's a very physical kind of component. And I actually love the physical component a lot. I think it's super important. And I think when I was working with my teenagers, you know, like 30 years ago, writing my dissertation, that was one thing that they were completely unaware of, was that their feelings were attached to their emotions. They didn't have those connections made. And so helping people make those connections, the physical, the social, cultural, and the ideal in all of these categories is part of the empathy circle. But there's research behind all of it that could be included in some kind of like academic analysis, which would include a lot of the people you were talking about, Colin, or the people that Edwin has been involved with as well. So this is the schematic that that was created based on the brainstorming and the clustering. And this schematic could produce the questions. You know, so we could have questions about awareness that are related to consciousness, related to peaceful coexistence, like what pulls you in to, you know, feeling peaceful. You know, what are you doing? What are you feeling? What are you thinking when you're feeling peaceful towards other people or towards yourself? The idea of language is so big for me. So the self produces language that is a representation of meaning for the self. And language has to have an equity to it. It has to have a balance to it. So the words that you're using, the concepts that you're using are also received, at least in some kind of equitable way. And there's a humility to it too. So the language that we're using has to have a humility in the sense that I'm not expecting you to totally understand me. But if there is understanding, there could be new social landscapes. So for instance, we could move beyond racism, we could move beyond sexism, we could move beyond a hatred, we can move into different realms of communication and language that create new social landscapes. And so we transcend all those blocks and barriers to peaceful coexistence because of the culture of empathy that we now are living. So like when Edwin was talking about these adolescents who vandalized my home, yeah, I mean, that kind of thing wouldn't be as likely to happen if we had more empathy in our culture, that in every kind of communication that we have, that part of our beingness, and not just a few people, but like everyone, the beingness. And this reminds me of something when I was thinking about that I do believe that the emotions matter, the feelings matter. But when we're articulating the importance of the culture of empathy and the importance of relational empathy to the world, most people are not going to buy into, well, yeah, it's all, you know, feelings, because, you know, that's just a touchy-feely kind of thing that a lot of people would just reject. And so I do think we need a different language to communicate what is empathy, because it's more than feelings. It's, in my opinion. I don't know. What do you think of that, Colin?
But it's more than feelings. Yes, I mean, there's the felt meaning that I was talking about, but there's also the cognitive side of it, you know, the perspective taking, the imaginative side. So, but yes, I'd be in favor of I don't know, maybe coming up with some way of keeping language around feelings, but maybe making it more accessible in some way. I can't think off the top of my head how, but maybe using the word emotions makes isn't as charged maybe as feelings. So that's me speaking as an emotional intelligence practitioner.
Edwin?
Yeah, for me, like if we take the situation with the vandalizing of your house there, I can sense into the experience of the community that you live in, right? For me, I feel a wholeness to it. It just as I feel into myself, I feel into, or I can be in a circle and feel into somebody else's experience. I also have this sense of feeling the wholeness of the society or of the culture that you're in. and by feeling the wholeness of the reality of how it is, I also have imagined the wholeness of what it could be, right? And then how we can move from the wholeness of what it is to the wholeness of the felt experience of what it could be. So I do see that the girl that you're saying that vandalized your place, she, it's like, well, her family didn't have like this empathy, probably there wasn't an empathy circle in the family. That would have been one way. In the school, she could have had empathy circles, just as one practice to build empathy skills. There's the restorative aspect, that you can have empathy circles as a restorative practice, like you and her and all the people involved, as well as the whole society can be kind of structured with that empathic awareness. So, but for me, it's to keep, like, you can analyze all the different pieces and so forth, but I start with the whole big picture and then sort of break it down into all those different components. Like, you're kind of breaking things down. So I kind of move between and in between the different structures. So that whole systems thinking approach. But I approach it from a felt experience to sort of keep my equilibrium and balance, and also for a vision of what that feeling could be. My feeling is that everyone would care for each other, for example, in that community. And so that's kind of some thoughts.
Anyone else? Kara?
So I loved it. I thought from beginning to end that this presentation was, it is 100% the humanness of relationships. It's super messy and there are so many layers, and also there are things that you can do. So that's kind of the path that I experienced here. Was there was some mess, and it was hard, and by the end I was really hopeful. Like, it brought me hope. So I want to share it just as I went through it. So when you first started at the beginning, it was the messy middle, the relationships, like, it's just messy. I loved the Rubik Cube analogy, because that first started there's so much to talk about when you're working with another human being. I loved the judgment versus judgmental, that we don't place values on things, we just acknowledge them. I love that sometimes relationships are hard, actually often and repeatedly. Relationships are hard. But empathy makes it simple, like simple enough for kids. But simple isn't easy, because you have to listen, you have to sit, you have to communicate, you have to show respect. You have to come human to human. And then the slides, and I was like, oh, they're so pretty. I loved them. They moved, and it was like each thing on the images was so clear, but it all was together. So it really honed in onto this is really simple, but it's really messy vibe that I was getting through the whole thing. I loved setting the goal right up front for the relational inventory. It's sort of like we're going to talk about this, but it's an ongoing development thing. Like, this is something forever. Relationships, work on them. There it is. I loved connecting it to the concept art. I liked how you went into what it is and what it isn't. So it's complex and it's layered, but it isn't clear or well defined. I loved how you talked about how we relate without regulating. And the what next, the co-construction. Obviously, relationships are a co-construction, right? So it's an ongoing development. We could create a journal, a workbook. There are so many things that you could do to make sure that your communications are as good as they can be. And then you got to the layers one, and I was like, ogres have layers, parfaits have layers. Everybody loves a parfait. And I was like, that's like the mindset shift, right? So yeah, ogres have layers, but parfait is more delicious. So let's look at the positive. I thought that the activity with the word cloud that we did, word cloud's not the right word, but the one we did before that ended up in that image of self and then connection and then the aware communicate, that was such an easy way to take a big old mess and see how it comes together as a way to move forward together. And it was so hopeful. So there are things that it's hard. It's simple, but it's hard, but we can do it. So that was my experience of your presentation.
Thank you. So I want to show you, it's just one page from the inner peace inventory, Colin, to kind of give an idea of what a relational empathy inventory might look like or not. Okay. It's just a little easier to look at it. So this is just one page. And this is the physical body one. So this box lists 3 physical habits to maintain and increase what brings you peace. And this is what pulls you away from peace. Physical habits that limit, that pull me away from peace. And then here we have number 1, when my body feels calm and well, which habits most maintain these physical feelings? When my body feels strong and focused, which habits most maintain this physical state? And when my body feels stressed or unwell, which activities do I most desire to diminish? So I don't know if this helps at all, but if we were to replace this with relational empathy inventory, personal relational empathy, physical body, and just really narrow it down to empathy, because you have a relationship with yourself, right? And this would be all the physical parts to your self, your personal relational empathy. So does this help at all?
It's, I mean, it sounds very practical, in terms of, looking at our habits, because, yeah, if you want to be more empathic, we need to look at our habits and um, establish new ways of being and new patterns. And it ties in with, because you're talking about the body, it ties in with felt meaning, and to be a common thread with what I was getting at in my presentation, and maybe in other presentations, there'll be this common thread. Would it be something like a worksheet that participants would fill out, like what you're showing, something like that?
Yeah,
that they could take away.
would be a PDF that's fillable online, or you can print it out and people could just handwrite in there, either way. But it doesn't have to be this structure. So if there are any comments right now, that's fine. Just jump in and start talking. Otherwise, I'm just going to suggest that just kind of reflect for a moment, and kind of look inside yourself and come up with maybe one statement or 2 sentences or whatever that define relational empathy for you. And if you want to speak it, you could speak it, or if you want to write it into the chat, you could write it into the chat. It's very difficult to define, I realize. It's very big. And it doesn't have to be totally inclusive. Just like whatever's alive for you right now about relational empathy and what you would like to contribute to the defining of it. So relational empathy for me is defined as, and fill in the blank. So Edwin, can you explain a little bit more about whole?
Yeah, for me, the whole would be like we're in a circle. If we were in we're in a group now, 7 of us, and there's the felt experience of the whole group. And I'm sort of imagining an exercise. One possible exercise is speaking about everyone sharing what is the feeling of the group for you. So sort of coming aware of not just, what's going on in my head or listening to someone else, but speaking to the felt experience of the whole group. And that kind of is scalable, right? It's scalable to the community, it's scalable to the country, it's scalable to the world. Yeah, so that's what was coming to mind. And I think you had to go. Did you want to, Karen, do you want to take part next week in the visioning circle at this time slot?
I think so.
Okay.
I might have had a conflict timing
Okay.
for 15 minutes early again, but let me look at my calendar
Okay,
and I'll
let me
I'll
know.
message
Yeah, okay, I'll send an
you guys.
email then.
Amazing, seriously, Colin, DJ, brilliant. Thank you so much. I got stuff out of today, so selfishly, I really appreciate you.
Thanks, Cara.
Wow, this is so great. I have to make sure to save this. Yeah, Jana, wow. You just wrote that off the top of your head? That's really good. Do you want to read that to us?
Relational empathy for me is defined as relational is to me how we are existing. We exist relationally. So it's fundamental to understanding and appreciating self and other, animate and inanimate, living and non-living. Empathy is the intention of kindness, compassion, genuine concern, and caring for all that I exist in relation to.
What do you think?
Maybe the other one people would like to read theirs too?
Sure. Wendy, you want to read yours?
Relational empathy for me is developing the awareness to be in connection with another and or others, and having the language to communicate together.
Violetta?
Mine is brief. I think last time when you presented, I shared how the communitas idea really stayed with me. And this kind of togetherness at the 3 layers that you talked about. I didn't want to repeat your words, but I think I'm staying with the communitas and I'm kind of drinking it in at this point, still letting it marinate and see where that takes me.
Yeah, I've actually been doing a lot of research on Communitas, and there's quite a bit out there.
Mm-hmm.
It is used in many, many different contexts. It's especially popular right now. So I think it fits really well with togetherness and the idea of empathy. Yeah. Colin?
I have to admit, I don't actually know what relational empathy is, and I haven't looked into it. And so I was just picking up on words that were said in the last hour that I identified with. So, and those 3 are the 3 that stood out for me. connecting, meaning making, and wholeness. Yeah, and also this idea that we are not alone. So we're in relation to something else. And as you said, and as Jana said as well, it's very broad. We're not just talking about human life. We're talking about other life, and not even life, inanimate as well. So, wow, it's big.
It's also small. So, there's also the relation with self, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So Edwin, would you like to sort of wrap it up here with your definition and what you're thinking about the next steps could be? I definitely want to be involved in the next week. I definitely do. And I definitely want to keep working on this, but I'd be interested in your thoughts about what direction you think would be most useful.
Okay, so did you want me to read mine, or were you just about kind of wrapping up? Okay, mine was relational empathy is an awareness and a feeling into the felt experience of the whole. So it's feeling into everything, like just as we feel into ourselves, feel into someone else. It's not feeling into, it's feeling into the kindness, but the anger, the fullness of what a culture is. So that's sort of, sort of my definition, but to be continued. Thanks.
Can I share an image briefly?
What's that?
Can I share an image briefly?
Oh, yeah.
No, host is disabled.
Oh, okay. Share. Okay, should be able to now.
See? This image is how I think of relational empathy. I think of it as the interdependence. This is from Sea Learning. This is how the cup is existing, and it exists in relation to all these other things. It has all kinds of causes and conditions. So that's all I wanted to share. Can I stop the share?
There's a button down at the bottom. Says, there you go. Okay, so yay, let's get a round of applause here for DJ for a great exploration. I really enjoyed the exploration and all the insights that are generated. I'm sad that we're ending this series like this right now. It is, I think, very important, for the progression of the Empathy Center. I've got to, create a nonprofit. I don't know if anybody has nonprofit experience. I just ordered the books on how to do a nonprofit. Maybe we can talk, GJ, just the steps, got to incorporate and all that kind of stuff, and then try to get the nonprofit status. And then the Empathy Center will be sort of the organizational the organization renting the property from my brother, who has a limited liability company. So we're sort of setting up all those relationships, and since it's going to be the Empathy Center, having clear definitions is going to be really important. So I do want to pick this up. I'm sad that we're not continuing to work on it right now, but just in terms of time, it's just like I'm totally swamped with setting things up. But it's just a matter of prioritizing. So the next step is next week. I want to do these visioning, these visioning circles, and I have a page where I'm starting to write this up. You can check it out. And I thought I'd start with our group. Anyone here that would like to take part in the visioning circle, same time, next place we have DJ, Colin, you up for it? Wendy, great. And Violetta, Jana? Okay, well, let me know. Yeah. And I think we'll see if Lou has been in some of the other circles. We've held 4 of them so far with Santa Barbara community. We're now going to set up a series on Fridays with the empathy community and workshop leaders. So this will be the first sort of open general one. And I'm still writing that up. And I'll add your names to to the February 3rd circle. And you can also, there's links there. You can see other circles that we've been holding with the Santa Barbara community. And there's links to the center, a tour of the buildings. So that's it. That's kind of the direction, is taking this work, setting up an empathy center, a retreat center around empathy, and as a core, and then but a space that kind of any kind of workshop can be held there. So but within the context, within that overall arching framework of empathy. So we're still kind of working on it. I do kind of, my next project right now is to work on the nonprofit, set that up, and all kinds of other projects. It's like a huge amount of work. Property needs, parts of it need to be renovated. It was like $7.5 million to buy the property. And, my brother's looking at putting in maybe another 2.5 million for renovations. So we're talking some serious, resources here. So anyway, I'd like, that's the next step. We'll make the shift and start talking about what to do with the center, and just maybe this can be the center for, empathy, kind of, building that culture of empathy. So that's it. Yeah, Colin.
I'm just curious, will there be opportunities for people in Europe to be part of this empathy center? We'll never actually make it there, but
we can do, that's the kind of the visioning. It's like, hey, we can do online workshops. You can come, you can stay there. If you're traveling all the way to Nepal, you can certainly travel to Santa Barbara. There's rooms, there's rooms to stay. So there's doing overnight, week-long, whatever, workshops, trainings. You can lead a workshop on self-empathy, whatever, it's in person or online. So it can be an in-person, online, but that's what we're going to be envisioned. That's what the visioning is to talk about. It's like, bring those questions, bring those ideas. You can grab a hold of an idea, kind of, build it and turn it into have the space, turn it into an actual project or something too. So yeah, so that's it. I'm slowly getting more excited about it as I start feeling my way into it. It was a bit of a shock to be, like, oh my God, what is all this? But I'm, starting to connect with people, starting to think about it. So starting to work my way into this whole big project, and glad to have y'all be involved in it too, to keep this connection going. So that's it. Maybe any final comments, Wendy, before we close?
I'd just like to thank you and everybody. I feel like I've learned so much throughout this whole experience. Just thank you. I'm really grateful.
Violetta?
I am excited to talk about continuing this project, but also the Empathy Center is an empathy center. So it's this kind of exciting, even if I never make it to California. I'm so curious to see where this is going.
Okay, Jana?
Just thank Colin and DJ for the 2 lovely presentations, and the slides are very beautiful and thought-provoking, and wish Edwin a lot of success there, and good luck. And thank you all for working on defining empathy together. It's interesting.
Thanks, DJ.
Yeah, I really feel close to everyone here, and I just love the idea of an empathy center. I really see peace in the world, and I think this is a profound step in the right direction. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Colin.
I'm glad that the slot is. I'll still have something to do in the slot next week. It's exciting what you're doing. Super exciting. I hope that we can keep in contact. Everyone here in the group in some way, shape, or form. I have learned a lot through all of this. it's really been a key part of my personal growth in the last number of months, um, and I feel like my self-empathy is increasing, and maybe it showed a bit today in the presentation. I just felt like I was more present, I suppose, so, but yes, grateful. That's my final word, grateful.
And so I'm very grateful to make all these connections. I don't see this as the end. This is just like, this is the seed, and it's going to keep growing. So it's I see us being in contact in an ongoing way, and picking up this topic again. So looking forward to seeing you next week. Empathy Circle around division. If you take a look at the website, you can see the tour of the space. Maybe it'll jog some ideas. It's like, how do we build a culture of empathy? And this is like a resource that we can build around. So see you next week. Bye, everybody.
Okay. See everyone.